I think we are kind of basing our society on 7,000 different plant varieties for everything that we do, from food to medicine to building materials, etc. But there's more than 400,000 different species of plants out there. So there's still so much more to find and to use.
After about 6 months, we'll be able to retest someone's biological age and say, good news, Erik, it works. Or bad news, we need to go back to the drawing board and let's figure this out. But I love the fact that we have a platform where we can actually start learning how to use the raw material nutrients to start extending life.
In large-scale cultivation systems or monocultures where you have grown the same type of crop on the same soil over and over again without crop rotations or without letting the soil rest, for example, and get back. So over time you deplete the micronutrients especially, and you just add NPK, the macronutrients, which will make the plant grow, but it won't have the micronutrients it needs to give us what we need as well. And that's a big issue.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Unreasonable Health Podcast. And I'm your host, Regan Archibald. Today, we're going to be jumping into what I think is the future of not only producing some of the most nutrient-dense foods and vegetables, but also maybe one of the most innovative ways of getting real supplementation and building up nutritional deficiencies that exist in so many humans. And so I've got a collaborative partner of mine, Erik Lundgren, on today with Supernormal Greens. And I'm so excited to have you here, Erik. So thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much, Regan. I'm very happy to be on here. Hopefully I can give you some really nice insights on what we're doing as well. So.
Oh, man. Well, all the conversations we've had in the past have been nothing but exciting and enlightening. So I'm sure we've got a lot to talk about today. But Supernormal Greens, if you look at the concept, maybe you could just kind of lay out for people the problem that you're solving when it comes to food.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's start from kind of the foundation on what we are doing as a company. And first of all, we're based in Sweden. And we're working in the area which is called indoor vertical farms or controlled environment agriculture, so CEA. And that's a technology that makes it possible to create controlled ecosystems. And instead of doing a kind of conventional agriculture where you are very dependent on the weather and what is kind of uncontrolled in the terms of growing, we can control very, very precise metrics and parameters. And by doing that, we can achieve higher yields, more efficient growing methods, but also growing things that is much harder to do in uncontrolled ecosystems, so to say. So what we do is we build large-scale industrial factories, and in those factories, we grow and we kind of produce an end product that is ready to eat. And as a company, we started with lettuce. Lettuce in the Swedish context is a good business model. It's a good product to start with. It's something that a lot of our consumers eat and want. But it's also a really good product to learn this technology and to develop this technology as well. So that's where we are today. So as a company, we are in most large store chains in Sweden. We have been running our large-scale facilities, so moving from pilot or R&D phase 2.5 years ago, approximately, and are harvesting tons every day. So we're talking large-scale production as well. Yeah.
Is it lettuces? Is that your number one crop right now?
Yes. So if you compare us to a lot of other vertical farmers, we have a very kind of Nordic or Swedish industrial approach. So instead of doing what a lot of other vertical farmers do, is they control an ecosystem, they create an ecosystem or a factory, and then they grow a lot of different crops and a lot of different herbs or spices or things that you could see in grocery stores today. We are only focusing on two products. And this is for us very, very important, because focusing on a very, very narrow segment makes it much easier for us to reach unit economy and really high efficiency in terms of automation. And all of that comes down to kind of offering a product at a price point that is paired with conventional farming. So what you can see from a lot of our colleagues in the industry is a much kind of higher price point, maybe 25-30% higher than organic even. And we have really, really focused on doing large-scale, narrow segments, and by doing that, we can compete even on price with the conventional farmed lettuce. And again, lettuce is where we start. It makes a lot of sense. It's a good product to grow in this type of systems, but it's also something where we can do a big impact in very short time. So in terms of sustainability in the Swedish context, we import more than 80-90% of all of the lettuce that we consume, mostly from Southern Europe, and that's a big impact. And we do already today, in our first commercial factory, we are achieving a 50% reduction in CO2 equivalents compared to the conventional farm as well. So yeah, it's our first product. It's a narrow segment, but the technology that we built and the innovation that we drive is actually the technology to create and to control ecosystems. And by doing that, we can decide whatever seed we want to grow, depending on what the consumer wants and what makes sense at the time. Yeah.
Wow. And the beautiful thing about your technology too is, based on the light spectrums, you can influence the amount of nutrients that something has in it, which will also influence the taste. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is the really, really interesting parts of being able to control the ecosystem. Is not only the possibility to grow things fast and a lot, it's also the possibility to design the right type of stress that makes the plant create what we want it to create. So if you look at the, let's say, high value compounds within a plant, for us, it could be nutrients, or it could be molecules used in longevity or supplements, for example. All of those compounds are created by the plant as a response to different stress symptoms. So, for example, talking about the light, as you mentioned, Regan, we can and we have done, and we do that already on large scale. We treat our plants with a blue light spectrum, for example, and that blue light spectrum makes the plant stressed. And in response to that stress, we can increase beta carotene and we can increase C vitamin, for example, which makes the plant more nutritious, but it also creates more of the compounds that that are flavonoids, or that is coloration, for example. So you can increase flavor and you can increase taste. So just to give you a little bit of numbers on that one, if we, for example, treat an arugula or a rocket salad with this type of treatment, and we are only talking about the last third. So we are focusing on high yields in the beginning, and then the last days before harvest, we add this type of stress factors. We can increase the nutrient content, let's say C vitamin, for example. So in a normal arugula, you will find approximately 300 milligrams of C vitamin per kilo. In the control group in indoor, just moving it indoors and controlling the parameters, you might reach 600, 800 milligrams. So already there, you more than double the C vitamin. By adding the blue light treatment, or the type of stress designed to enhance C vitamin, we can reach about 1,500 milligrams of C vitamin. So we're talking over 5 times increase in kind of pinpointed nutrients, which are also translated into flavor or color, for example.
It's amazing. And so you just do that the last 3 days, right before the harvest?
Yeah, we call it end of production treatments. So we focus at 2 thirds in the beginning. That is focused on giving the plant exactly what it wants, so it grows really, really fast and creates a lot of biomass. And then in the end, we add these quality treatments where we induce the right type of stress designed to do precisely what we want the plant to do, if that is increasing color or increasing flavor, or in this what we're doing with the lettuce right now, increasing C vitamin and beta carotenes, which makes the shelf life much longer, for example.
Yeah, and And the beautiful thing about that is you're in Sweden, and so your days are already getting really short. I mean, it's November 10th, November 9th when we're recording this,
Yeah.
and the ability to get really high quality lettuce and vegetables in the winter is challenging, and the transportation, it takes a long ways just to get things up there. And it's same here in Utah. And in Utah, one of my biggest frustrations is finding good quality produce is so challenging when it's not in the summer or fall here. We do a lot of these co-ops, and so you've solved a big problem where people can have really fresh vegetables, but not only fresh vegetables, but fresh vegetables that have unique flavors and very unique concentrations of nutrients. Because do you know the research as far as the amount of nutritional deficiencies in the soil, like in the U.S., for example? Do you know kind of what it looks like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big topic or talk right now, where we are kind of lacking a lot of the very crucial nutrients that we need, both for the plants to grow strong and have what is needed for us to feel better and perform better, of course, but also in terms of micronutrients, especially. So if you divide nutrients for plants, you talk about macronutrients, the NPK formulas, and you talk about micronutrients. So that's in our case, we use, I think, 14 different micronutrients that is in much smaller, values or amounts than the macronutrients. But those are really, really crucial for some of the functions of the plants to work well, but also really, really crucial for us humans to have these small amounts of the micronutrients as well. And especially that is what you can see in large-scale cultivation systems or monocultures, where you have grown the same type of crop on the same soil over and over again, without crop rotations or without letting the soil rest, for example, and get back. So over time, you deplete the micronutrients especially, and you just add NPK, the macronutrients, which will make the plant grow, but it won't have the micronutrients it needs to give us what we need as well. And that's a big issue, of course.
And so with vertical farming, I mean, not only is it solving nutritional imbalances, which I appreciate from a healthcare perspective, because the majority of the people, we run their blood labs, magnesium, calcium, phosphorus ratios that are off. We see massive deficiencies in vitamin D, and probably 80% of the people we test. And so it's nice to be able to have some alternatives. And right now, your marketplace is primarily Scandinavia. What's the future look like for vertical farming?
So, I mean, we will start where it makes a lot of sense. So the quickest problem for us to fix is food, of course. So over time, we have created a food system that is, we are growing more and more and more, but we are also throwing away more and more, and we are getting less and less from our food. So there's a big systematic fault that needs to be fixed. And by, for example, replacing some of the ways that we grow some of our food, vertical farming is not for all type of food, like staple crops or potatoes and stuff like that. That should be grown conventionally, I think. But there's a lot of food that makes a lot of sense to move into these type of cultivation systems. So, of course, food is where we start, and we start by making better alternatives to already existing products in the stores. But already today, we're looking into what is the next kind of step of food. And then you talk about functional food, for example, or bio-enhanced food. And as an example of that, we are doing a project right now where we create a bagged lettuce as we have today. So we have a mix inside of a bag. But by, for example, changing 50% of the content to much more unconventional crops or products, and by adding a lot of these quality treatments where we increase the nutrient, we can increase the overall nutrient density that you take in from a bag of lettuce or a portion of lettuce by 5-10 times, for example. So by just adding other ingredients to that bag, we can create maybe a lettuce with there's a variety of lettuce called black harang, which is good for insomnia, for example. We can add that to the bag. Or there might be other type of crops that you can add to the bag that really pinpoints a function that you are looking for. So that's a very kind of easy for us next step to do. So create better food or functional food, which is in itself really, really interesting, because it's kind of pointing the direction of a future food system into something I feel much more proud about, and I think that we really, really need. But that is in terms of food. So again, what we do as and the innovation that we create is controlling ecosystems. And there's not only food that is grown in ecosystems. So of course, if we look into pharma, if we look into supplement, if we look into longevity, most of these compounds used in these industries are based out of plant molecules. And often, especially in pharma and supplements, for example, they come from plants that is very, very hard to cultivate in large scale. So you still see very, call it primitive growing, or you can see synthetical copies of those plant molecules being created instead of the real thing or the real deal, so to say. So what we can do is also take that type of plants and put it into our system, not only making it much more efficient to grow it, but again, adding this quality treatment, which make us increase the compound we're looking for. So in the R&D, and what we are talking a lot about now with different stakeholders is, of course, let's take resveratrol, for example. So it's a compound that is used in longevity with a lot of health benefits. It comes from Polygonum japonica. So it's a crop often sourced in Asia, India, and China. So what we can do is we can take this product into a controlled environment. We can grow it with much higher quality and higher efficiency, but we can also increase the content of the resveratrols and the subgenres of glucosides inside of the resveratrol by adding the right type of stress. So what we do is we take these really high value plants, and then we put them into different chambers where we add different type of stress factors. It could be blue light, for example. It could be drought. It could be hot days, cold nights, all these different type of stress symptoms. And we try to find which type of stress increases the content of what we're looking for. So with the same technology, we are able to create a full supply chain that is very complex today in a factory where we can both grow the plant, we can isolate the molecule we're looking for, and we can turn it into a product within the same factory and then deliver to customers. So that's kind of what we see for the upcoming years as well. Yeah.
And what I love about this is because we use a lot of resveratrol, a lot of spermidine, spirulina, the things you and I have spoken about in the past. And I'm so excited because it's not only is it higher quantity of the bioactive compounds that we want to promote longevity, but it also is in an environment that's completely organic. And, because a lot of the pollutants, even if you're in an organic area, you still have planes flying over. There's still contaminants in water. People are still taking pharmaceuticals, which there's not a lot of carbon filtration systems in public water that removes those pharmaceutical agents. And so I see this as the future of supplementation. So many people are taking so many supplements, and what's in those supplements versus what's written on the label of the bottle are usually two different things. And so I see what your company's doing, where I get really excited is, yes, the food is really cool, because imagine having a patient who struggles with insomnia. Hey, eat the functional food. There's a lettuce. Just eat this lettuce every night, and they start sleeping a little better. And then we want to work on their, you and I have spoken about using duckweed, for example, as a protein source. And it's like, cool. And then when you wake up in the morning, get your duckweed because it's high in folate and B12. And so I see this as being an exciting part of the future. And so maybe if we could pivot just a little bit, so resveratrol are some of the things that, if you look at that, there's huge possibilities there. What are some other things that you could see, like as far as before we shift totally into the supplement line, what are some of the other foods that you plan on really like bringing to the marketplace pretty quickly?
Yeah, so now we're kind of focusing a lot into longevity, because I think that's a really emerging area, and also an area where quality is really, really important. And again, the stress is the quality creator of these compounds or the plants, but it's also what is lacking or what is changing when you do conventional farming of these products. So again, you can have resveratrol from sourced conventional farming, but the quality of that will be also affected by the season and the environment, etc. So if you want high quality and consistent quality, just moving it indoors is a good first step. We do resveratrol. Just before we had this podcast interview, I tasted some of our lovage leaf, and that is to create the senolytics, especially quercetin. So that's one of the plants we kind of worked quite a lot with. We have worked with like high nutrient intensity plants like moringa, for example, but are also trying out ashwagandha and other kind of more known plants that is used and has been used for a long time. But what I think is one of the most interesting is the one you mentioned before, the duckweed. It's a small aquatic plant. It's called Lemna minor. And that's a real, I think, super plant for many reasons. So as you said, it has a really nice structure in terms of nutrient density. And the protein itself is a high value rubisco protein with a very nice complexity of amino acids, so it's a full amino complex. But this small plant is not in itself only the best thing you can get. You can also use these plants as a bioreactor. So again, it's a small aquatic plant, and why it's very good as a bioreactor. And what I mean by that is you can add other compounds that you would like to create, like rapamycin or spermidine, for example, as you mentioned before. By using CRISPR technology, you can add those molecules into the genome of the duckweed and then grow the duckweed to harvest or isolate the rapamycin or spermidine, for example, and use that as a bioreactor or biochamber for what we're doing. And this small plant is doubling in biomass. We have done 103% growth rate. So day 1 we had 5 grams, and day 3 we had 21 grams. So more than doubling the biomass. It grows really, really fast, and doing that with a very, very few resources. It has a very simple genome, so it's easy to find a vector of what you would like to add to it, and then add it, and you have the bioreactor ready. But it's also asexual reproduction, which means that it's cloning itself instead of sexual reproduction. So you lose the risk of losing quality or having mutations, for example. So by being really, really good at creating that, we're not only having a kind of a strong foundation in a high protein plant, but also the possibility to work with bioreactors. So that is kind of what we do on at least large scale in the R&D today.
And the duckweed, if I remember our conversation correctly, it's got 7 times more protein than like soy, which a lot of people think of soy as a plant-based protein, is kind of the highest quantity. Yeah. Duckweed, is it 7 times more? Is that correct?
So the amount of protein is the same almost. It's depending again a little bit on the different type of stress that the plant has had, but you can get 7 times more protein out of each square meter or hectare of growing than if you compare it with soy. So it's much more efficient in growing. And I mean, this is also a thing. We have done soy quite a lot in our R&D, and what we haven't mentioned, which I think is also really important, is you can have high quantity of something in a product, but that doesn't mean high quality. So if you look at soy, for example, it's very important to talk about bioavailability. So in soy, you have anti-nutrient, it's called phytic acid, I think. And if you reduce that, then you increase the bioavailability. And that is also something we can do within indoor farming. But that is also very important. So if you compare, just to make it easy, 50% protein content in a duckweed or 50% protein content in a soy, it's much easier for our body to absorb the protein from a duckweed, for example, because it doesn't have the anti-nutrients that you will find in soy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was 7 times. I did remember correctly, just the
Yeah, yeah,
context was off,
yeah,
which is
exactly.
half of my life, Eric. You have no
Yeah.
idea. But it's still impressive because what that means, especially for you on a manufacturing side, is you're getting a product that can grow really quickly, which solves a lot of, I think in longevity, loss of proteostasis is one of the 9 hallmarks of aging. And so we do encourage, we're big advocates of getting our clients to eat a lot of protein, making sure their folic acid, their B12 levels are up as well. And sometimes it's just nice to have a plant-based source. So the other thing that you're looking at is the uh, matalafi. Can you talk about
Yeah.
the Samoan herb? I'm really fascinated with that one for inflammation primarily, because a lot of our clients, they come because they have pain, they want to regenerate their joints, their back.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a big interest of mine. I've been spending most of my last 10 years at least really, really diving deep into kind of indigenous plant medicine and thinking about the wisdom that you will find in all of the indigenous people around the world. It's known that they know, like, for every problem there's a plant. They can just go out in the wood and find, I know that these plants work for inflammation. I know this works for headache, etc. So there's so much information to be found there in that wisdom. And I think we are kind of basing our society on 7,000 different plant varieties for everything that we do, from food to medicine to building materials, etc. But there's more than 400,000 different species of plants out there. So there's still so much more to find and to use. And kind of what you open up when you start creating ecosystems is the possibility to start using a much more wider variety of plants that we haven't been able to grow on large scale before, because the plant has a very specific need in terms of its ecosystem, or it has a very complex way of growing. But when you can start to build and control and make custom ecosystem for those types of plant, you open up the possibility to use a plant like the matalafi, for example, in much wider scale. And I'm from Samoan Islands in the South Pacific, and matalafi is used there a lot to reduce fevers, and you massage it into the head and create different oils, etc. And it has been shown now in quite recent research to have the same potential or a higher potential of actually replacing the ibuprofens and the iprine and all of these common medicines that we use today. That is synthetic copies of plant molecules, but now instead you can use the matalafi. And I think we talked about this before as well, but I think you studied in Hawaii.
Yes. Yeah.
A while,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same there. And in the whole Pacific area, they have a variety of plants that they call the canoe plants, which were thought to be really, really kind of high value and in some way a bit holy as well. So the small amount of space they have in the canoe, a lot of that was to move different plants between the islands. And one plant like this is the langongo, or onnu, I think it's called as well, which is also used both in medicine, both Western medicine and in indigenous medicine in the Pacific, while still being very high nutrition plants, etc., etc. So I think the idea of creating ecosystems to open up the possibility for a whole new set of plants to be used in our society is the most fascinating, I think. So therefore, I spend a lot of time kind of reading and looking into and researching old plant medicine, like the matalafi.
Yes. And you and I share the similar passion, which is you have this enormous scientific background, and you're understanding the complex genetic structures of all these plants, and just all the detail you gave us on duckweed was like, wow, that's incredible. It's asexual reproduction, things like that. But then also, if we just go back and I've always said, well, the human body, what worked for it 5,000 years ago, it probably still works today. I mean, obviously we have different factors and variables that we have to consider, but we've used a lot of that ancient medicine. We always will, but yet we're leaning into peptide therapy and some of the, stem cell therapy, some of these new molecules that we're just discovering. But I think at the foundation, I would love to have more of these medicinal or functional type of plants be a part of my patients' everyday life. And so that's where I got so excited. And I sent you an avalanche of things like, I want to make this product and this one and this one. And so I think we've got a fun future together. But one of the things in Chinese medicine that I found was fascinating is when someone was sick, well, first of all, they would observe where the animals would go and the horses would get sick, and they would see what kind of plants that they would eat. And then they would observe what would happen to humans when they ate those same kind of plants and herbs. And then they were able to discern that bitter plants, had more of this astringent property, and it relieved dampness, and it helped calm down fire or heat, or what we'd call inflammation. Then they found that the sweet things were more tonifying, so it would build up energy in the body, build up reserves. And then they would look at things that were more rancid, and they would say, oh, those are good for the lungs, good for the liver and the filtration systems. So it's fascinating, because what you're doing is you can actually have an environment where you can trigger those same, essentially it's the molecules, some of the polyphenols that we're tasting when the nutrients are different. And so you can almost manipulate that. I hate to use the word manipulate because people are going to have a negative connotation to it, but we can, you can literally, you're creating medicine inside of a factory. And I don't know if anyone else who's doing it or even thought about it. So yeah, I'm excited for you.
Yeah. I mean, a plant itself is the most, the perfect bio laboratory you can find. So, I mean, most of the things that we use is either learned from the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom. And not only understanding that, but also being able to amplify or fortify, as you said. I mean, it just gives a potential if we look in both in near future, of course, but if we look like 10, 20, 25 years into the future, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't base most of both nutrients, medicine, and kind of all of the necessary things we need to have a good life and a long health span, why that shouldn't be based on just plants instead of synthetic copies of plant molecules. Yeah,
completely. And I think with, unfortunately, all the damage that's happened on the planet, like right now, having these kind of sheltered environments are going to be critical for us getting the nutrients that we need. And not only that, but it creates more stability for population growth. And the more population that we have, the more innovation we have, the more creativity. So it just solves a lot of these problems. And for you carnivores out there, I know you carnivores are saying, well, plants have their own defense mechanism. And Erik alluded to that when he talked about the anti-nutrients in soy. Soybeans don't want to be eaten. They want to be, they just want to grow more soybeans. That's what they're there for. And most plants, they have these anti-nutrients. So think of you regenerative ranchers out there. I grew up on a cattle ranch in Idaho here, Erik. So my family raised at one time about 1,000 Black Angus cattle. And so I could just imagine having a vertical farm. I'm just seeing the future. And then we could take some of these plants that have high nutrient density, and we could actually feed them to the animals. And then I would guarantee you're going to see a better outcome in the quality of the meat that we're eating. So have you looked into that at all as far as agriculture goes and feeding animals, or even people who want super pets or longevity for their dogs or cats?
I mean, of course, it's the same concept. It's just a question on where in the food chain we want to consume it. If it's consumed through eating an animal who already eaten it, or if we consume it ourselves. But I think one thing that is also really interesting and needs to be understood is we don't need to base our full diet on plants. But there are a lot of kind of epigenetic information that you will find in plants. You don't need to eat much, but it triggers things in your body that keep you healthy and becomes precursors of some of the really, really important functions in our bodies as well. So food is also carrying a lot of information for our genes to behave in different ways. So you find this epigenetic information in a lot of different foods. And I think also David Sinclair talks quite a lot about eating stressed plants and why that is important as well, because we need to get these type of compounds within ourselves to maintain our own kind of machinery, or all of the kind of things that we have been created in many, many generations ago in evolution to react in different ways to or respond in different ways to the food we eat. And that is what you will find in plants, either through eating it with an animal in between or eating it directly.
I love that. And so if we go, some of the other things that that you guys are uncovering, what do you see is kind of the next step in your iteration? I know right now you're building a new plant, and congratulations, you guys are bringing on some investors. Actually, we have a mutual client who's I'm excited for that relationship. I've had other people who have expressed interest as well. But maybe you could talk on the business growth side. What's your next phase? You're going to grow another factory in Sweden, but then where do you see the rollout going?
Yeah, so if we look at what we're doing, we have been, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, very narrow to make sure that what we create is not a premium product. There's a lot of vertical farms out there who are doing a very important job of kind of not entertaining, but educating people around the world about this new method of farming. But it doesn't really become a high impact technology until you're able to grow or produce this on a price point that people can afford to buy. So we have been really, really focused on creating these large scale industrial ecosystems where we have big factories that are able to produce thousands of kilos per day. And that is kind of what we are scaling up right now. So we know we've reached a point where we can produce and compete with conventional farming. And that is our kind of cash flow machine that we will scale up from here. And we do also, as a company, kind of product specific factories or technology. So we know we can do a lot of different type of head lettuces or baby leaf. That is kind of checked. So now we're just looking to scale that into markets where it both makes sense in terms of market size or market fit with the product range that we have, but also where we can do impact in terms of sustainability. And it all comes down to finding the right context. So, for example, as you said, in northern US, it's kind of similar to where we are located in Sweden, where we buy most of our food or lettuces from the southern Europe and then import it here. So that type of context we can find around the world in some areas. And then, of course, expanding what we're doing into those areas makes a lot of sense. So in terms of funding or growing the business, we have a kind of narrow range that we are really, really good in producing, and that is what we're scaling up as well. But we see that only as a stepping stone. My co-founder, Andreas, who you also discussed with or met before, both of us are very keen on making it, we find it really important to emphasize that what we're doing today is just a stepping stone into our next kind of vision, which would be to find the next product range on where it makes a lot of sense to build large-scale factories. And on that, we are especially looking into high-value plant compounds, which could be found in supplements or some of the longevity supplements or medicines or pharma, for example. So again, if we look at food, I think we started where it makes a lot of sense, both in terms of economical sustainability, but also actual impact. And that is where we're scaling right now. But I think the next big area would be supplement the pharma industry, which is the same, trying to find the right product, finding a partner or a customer who wants to make this transition into a more sustainable and much higher quality production, where you, again, cut the full supply chain into one factory, and you're able to create resveratrol factory, for example, or quercetin factory, or a metformin factory, or whatever, all the way from seed till the finished product. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's fascinating. And I hope to be the right partner to help you grow on the supplement side, because longevity is something that we swim in every day, and really looking to extend the life of our clients. And what a better way, because we actually have testing that we can do to see how the methyl groups are looking, the telomeres on the DNA. There's different blood markers that we can phenotypically kind of get a good idea of how fast somebody's aging. We do carotid artery scan to see the thickness of the carotid artery intima media, and that's another predictor of aging. But I could just imagine if we can start using some of these foods, these supplements that have the quantity of nutrients that we want, because once again, the bottle versus what's the label shows versus what's in the bottle are not always coinciding, and it's not accurate. But with your science, I think we can we'll have some evidence as soon as we start using these. After about 6 months, we'll be able to retest someone's biological age and say, good news, Erik, it works. Or bad news, we need to go back to the drawing board and let's figure this out. But I love the fact that we have a platform where we can actually start learning how to use the raw material nutrients to start extending life. I mean, food is medicine. This is no better way. Food is medicine, but now we're stacking science and innovation on top of it.
Yeah, 100%. And we have some good things going on, Regan. I think we'll find something really good there. And actually, my own researchers, Shireen, for example, she's one of my plant researchers. She's been eating a full portion of duckweed now for 4 weeks and documenting her kind of health or her nutrient biomarkers, for example. So that's a good part of running an R&D for longevity and supplements, that you can try it out fresh and become healthier as you do it.
Yes. Oh, good. Well, if you ever get a chance, send me the data. And then, I guess, my final question for you is, you have a lot of passion around this topic. I mean, you study extensively, you're speaking on different platforms. What is it that drives you? What is it internally that keeps you motivated to take on such a big project like this?
Yeah, I mean, that's an answer I try to find out every day. I mean, what drives me really is just full-on immersion and inspiration. And I mean, from the beginning, because this is not my first entrepreneurial journey or company I'm growing, but again, I'm from the Samoan Islands in the South Pacific, and recently I became a high chief of my village. And in the South Pacific, the water levels are rising 5 times higher than the rest of the world. So in the latest IPCC report that was conducted in the beginning of this year, it literally says that my island, or at least my village, will be underwater before my generation is gone. So I mean, that's kind of the driver to change the food system, because the food system is responsible for 1/3 of all of our GHG emissions, and the climate change that we see is, of course, in somehow related to my need of trying to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen to my home village in Samoa. But wow. I think that, in combination with also the inspiration that I find in ancient technologies, if we look at indigenous wisdom, for example, we look into plant medicine, that's where we come from. And I see a lot of change in our society that is becoming much more kind of available and sort of is also just driven by inspiration. And it's kind of a combination of reading something historical and understanding how they did it 1,000 years ago, and then trying to translate that into, okay, how can I use that to change tomorrow instead, and going back to that wisdom, but in a much better and more sustainable and more scalable model, which is kind of what we're building in the company. So yeah, I think that's the combination of those two who makes it really, really easy to go up in the morning when I wake up.
Yeah, that is a driver. I love that. Well, thanks so much for sharing it. And what does it mean to be a high chief? I mean, that sounds like
Yeah.
really prestigious. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, so in the Samoan culture, you have really large families. So I'm a chief representing my family of around 800 to 900 family members.
Wow.
And villages are consistent of maybe 4 or 5 different families. So it's kind of being in the municipality of a town in a Western society. So you sit there as and representing the need of your family and the voice of your family, in especially questions regarding land. And I mean, our family owns historically 3 generations a really, really big plot of land with a lot of rainforest and stuff like that. So a lot of land discussions, a lot of, I mean, common discussions that you have in a Western society, but in a setting that is much more primitive. So it's still a very, I mean, we're self-sufficient in food mostly, and it's still, we don't have running water. I think we are running water 2 times a week or something like that. It's still a very kind of, I would say, in between modern culture and indigenous culture, which of course also drives my interest into that area, I would say.
Yeah. Wow. How fascinating. Well, yeah, I appreciate that dialogue there, because it says a lot. So Erik, I really appreciate you being on today. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you?
I mean, we can talk for hours, I think, Regan, about this. I mean, I hope most of you listening really understand the concept, and I think that's the most interesting. So the concept of creating controlled ecosystem where we can create the type of stress that in biofortifies or changes or increases the content of really, really high value compounds. And again, doing that in food today, but doing that in plants that could be supplying the future of health span or future of nutrient, for example. Understanding that concept gives a lot of different possibilities that could be explored with maybe any of your listeners or things that we are already working on, Regan.
Right. Well, thanks so much. And for those of you listening, you know how to get in touch with me. And if you have anything in particular that you think could be, game changing, or longevity research that you've done on a certain compound or molecule, Erik and I are in communication quite frequently right now, as we're looking to develop the world's best longevity products. And so would love to hear your insights. Erik, thanks so much for being on the show, and we'll definitely be having you back as we develop some of these new products and materials. So, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Regan. Thank you very much, everybody.
And if you guys enjoyed the show, make sure you share it with your friends, family, loved ones, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again. Thanks again, Erik.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.